Hi, guys. Welcome to Testing Stage Conference 2022. I'm very excited to be here. And this is my second year in a row presenting a topic as part of this conference. And thank you very much to Committed for doing a fantastic job. Gathering the big audience of professional testing network together and sharing knowledge by inviting various of different speakers and QA professionals around the world talking on different topics. This is extremely important, and the guys are doing fantastic and fabulous job. So today we're going to talk about an interesting topic, the topic which I was trying to think because I have several topics to choose from which I wanted to present. But for this topic, much more exciting for me to discuss, because I feel that many people out there, many QA professionals, not fully understanding the importance of it. So let me jump straight into presentation. So today's topic is exploratory testing. Is it a separate discipline or part of the tester's mentality? I'm not going to bore you with the exploratory testing techniques. You heard, you read, you know this topic very well. Any modern quality assurance professionals definitely heard about exploratory testing, but I tell you even more. You don't need to hear about exploratory testing. You're doing exploratory testing every day. Whether you want to do this or not, it is part of your day-to-day activities. And you will understand why. So let's jump in. My name is, again, Ruslan Desyatnikov, founder and CEO of QA Mentor. For those of you who would like to connect with me, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I'm, there all the time. I like to participate in various of different discussions. I publishing various of different articles and posts. Sometimes, we have heated discussions with some of you guys out there, and that's a healthy thing, right? You can agree, you can disagree, as long as there's a respect, mutual respect. That's the most important thing. So let's jump into the topic itself. So the first question I would like to ask anybody who talks about exploratory testing, or many organizations out there, testing teams, agile teams, quality assurance professionals, we talk to many people out there. Why do we care about exploratory testing? What's so crucial? What's so important about it? What problems will it solve for you, right? That's my favorite question. So I gather a lot of feedbacks, and I keep hearing similar types of answers. And I wanted to show you what people think out there, okay? I was not selective. This is the most common answers which we typically hear in. So to understand and learn application and end-to-end flow better, very valid. To save time and not build functional test cases. Well, this is where I disagree. Yes, you can save time by not building the test cases, because you're going to do exploratory testing. You can create and write test charter and ignore the test cases, but that's not a very good strategy. Even though many people tend to state that you don't need test cases. When you do exploratory testing, you absolutely don't need to build test cases. I completely disagree with this statement. And you will understand throughout this presentation, I will address some of these points and some of the factual statements there, so you can decide for yourself. Other things that to help identify better coverage for negative test cases. I would agree with this. Exploratory testing helps you to think outside of the box. It's helping you to open eyes wider, if you wish. It's helping you to take different paths, to take different turns when you test the application. And that's all contributing towards helping you to identify and create negative scenarios and achieve much better comprehensive test case coverage. To improve my existing test cases by identifying different flows and scenarios. 100% agree. This is very crucial. This is very important. So think about it. You build test cases, right? But the test cases are not final product. Test cases are constantly evolving. This is where many people do not understand. They say, well, you build the test cases and that's it. No, the test cases is a living document. You updating, modifying, you improving, you adding additional, steps to verify, validation steps. You adding additional scenarios and negative scenarios and field validation verifications. It's constantly evolving, right? So through the exploratory testing helping you to identify more scenarios, to identify unique paths and unique flows which you might not identify initially when you start building or designing your test cases, right? Let's continue. To get the freedom and think outside of the box. You're gonna get the freedom. Well, freedom, you always should have a freedom, right? I always a big fan of structured testing, but when the structured testing is done, it's complete, you have a freestyle testing. This is what I'm referring to. That's where your freedom is. You test the way you want, right? Without any structure. You test whatever you want, however you want, and that's your freedom, okay? And that's part of the testing phase. To improve thinking outside of the box and standard scenarios. Yes, agree. To find more functional and usability defects. Exploratory testing helping you to find issues and problems which you might not find sometimes through your declared test cases, because you thinking a little slightly different, right? When you have a freedom of exploring the application, when you're not following certain steps, which is important to follow certain steps, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of a disciplined approach. So the test cases which follows the steps are important, but at the same time, when you do exploratory testing, it stipulates you to think creatively, to learn the application from different angles and perspectives, and open eyes, again, wider to look at things maybe slightly different. To find more functional usability, to improve test case design. Yes. Test case design, I completely agree. When you look at the application, when you go through the various paths, you can improve your existing test cases by adding additional scenarios, additional checkpoints, additional validations, which initially you might not think of it, right? So that's normal. That's okay, as long as you're documenting that. Imagine you're not documenting anything. You cannot really fully document anything in the test charter, right? You can document things which you want to verify and validate. You can put some goals and objectives there, but what about expected results? What about acceptance criteria? What about, all of this specific steps which need to be verified and validated, right? It defeats the whole purpose of, yes, it's a free testing, it's exploration of the application, but still, if you identify certain flows, certain path which leads to a defect, to a problem, this is something which was missed during the testing coverage. And for that reason, you have to build a test case for it. If you're not going to build a test case for it, if you're going to ignore it, if that information will be recorded only in the charter observation section there, that's not enough. That's not enough, because next cycle, next regression test run, the same problem might reappear. But in your case, if you didn't document the test case, what's going to happen? To provide much quicker feedback to stakeholders, especially during short sprints. It's a good method of providing feedback, and it's a great thing to provide the feedback, but still, it does not exempt you from not documenting test scenarios or test cases. To save and control my time better. Well, again, save. Again, what does it mean, save? You save time because you're not doing what? You're not building the test cases, or you're saving time because you're taking shortcuts there that your test charter are much smaller documents compared to 100 test cases which you need to build and design. Well, I don't believe it's saving time, right? You taking shortcuts here, right? You should never take shortcuts. You should use exploratory testing as a additional sort of technique as part of your test validation, as part of your investigation process, as part of your checking and validations and verification. But you should not, forget everything what typically needs to be done and just apply exploratory testing and say, well, I tested the application, I found all the defects, it's ready to go live. It's never gonna work. Absolutely not. Help to think like a real user. Well, if you're a tester, you always should think as a real user. You should always put yourself in the shoes of the real user. Okay, so that's the voice of the software testers around the world. This is what we keep hearing. Some cases I agree, some cases I disagree. Make your own judgments. You can agree or you disagree. This is my personal opinion. So let's get back to 1984, and this is where Sam Carner defined exploratory testing, right? He defined this as a style of software testing that emphasizes the personal freedom and responsibility, right, of the individual tester to continually optimize the quality of his or her work, okay, by treating test-related learning, test design, test execution, and test results interpretations as mutually supportive activity that run in parallel throughout the project. Very, very big and complex definition, right? But I like where Sam Carner stated that it's a style, okay, of software testing. He defined this as a style, okay? Well, one can think that it's a style, it's a type, it's a flavor, it's a technique, it's a strategy, it's a methodology. You can call it whatever you want to call it, right? But exploratory testing is all about discovery, investigation, and learning, right? This is part of this. But isn't it testing? Just a general testing is also about discovery, investigation, and learning. Why do we have to call it exploratory to apply discovery, investigation, and learning? No. If you're a tester, every day we doing the discovery, we continuously doing investigation, okay, and we're learning. Every day we're learning application, we're looking at the application from different angles, we getting more and more understanding, we becoming a subject matter experts, right? So it emphasizes on learning and adaptability, right? While the software is being tested, the testers learn things that together with experience and creativity generate new good tests to run, right? So this is all true. This is all correct. Exploratory testing emphasizes on the personal freedom and responsibility of the individual tester. So again, the key word here is freedom, right? Well, if you're a tester, you're also free to experiment things. You have to experiment things, right? And you have to build in that freedom of testing. Freestyle testing, I call this, right? you run, you execute your functional test cases, your integration test cases, your usability, UI, database test cases, positive, negative test cases, which part of the functional testing. And then you said, okay, I completed, but the next step or the final step is do a freestyle testing. Okay, just randomly start doing various of different things. Try to go outside of the typical discipline structured scripted testing and do variations, do permutations, go through various of different modules, jump in between different modules and take different paths and different turns and different possibilities, pretending that you might not be a smart user, and smart user might, not a smart user might take a little bit different or unique steps, maybe because they don't understand fully the workflow, or they simply doing things slightly different, right? What's the reaction of the application? That's something which we need to verify. We need to validate, right? Not everything has a positive flow. There's other alternative flows. There's exceptional flows, and that needs to be verified. That needs to be validated. Exploratory testing is done without any specific plans and schedules. Well, there are plans, right? If you do the exploratory testing, you're planning for the exploratory testing, right? You're planning, timelining this, because you can plan the exploratory sessions, which typically runs from 30 minutes to 2 hours. And sometimes I saw 3 hours. It's a little bit difficult because you have to capture information. You have to write down observations. So, 3 hours, it's a little bit too much, in my opinion. But it's, in terms of the schedule, right? It's very difficult to come up with estimation, because you have no idea upfront how many test cases you need to run and execute. You have an idea that you need to verify that specific area, that specific functionality, that specific user story, that specific module. But if you didn't create the test cases before for this, for instance, it will be very difficult for you to predict how long it's going to take really to verify and validate this, right? When you have some information up front, which is the test cases, which you build up front, representing your user story or representing your new enhancements or representing your new functionality, you would be able to predict in terms of how much time it will require to run and execute that. But when you start exploratory testing, and that's the reason we have a number of debates on LinkedIn with some of famous people in quality assurance and testing, where I ask a simple question, guys, what are the metrics associated with exploratory testing? How do we estimate things there? I received no answers, unfortunately. How can you timeline and understand how long it's going to take you to complete testing? Well, I'm going to do exploratory testing and then I'll figure it out. No. That's not the answer, guys. You cannot figure things out. You have to plan for it. You have to estimate. You have to predict, right? You have to have some kind of plan. You cannot just say, oh, okay, why do we need to start building test cases when everything might change? Well, wrong statement or wrong question. We have to build test cases because developers will start building and implementing your user stories, right, as part of the sprint. So if they have information to implement user stories, you have the information to build the test cases. So when I hear you don't need to build test cases, you don't need to build test cases at all, it's useless, it's waste of time, I don't understand this, guys. I truly don't understand this. And I just cannot comprehend the statement from some of you guys out there who opposing building test cases or creating a test design before the functionality is delivered for testing, right? You're stating, let's wait and start exploratory testing. Guys, if we're gonna wait for what? What's the purpose? What's the point of waiting? And then you will not build the test cases, and then you're gonna test it, and then somebody else needs to, verify and validate this. What they gonna do? Or you're gonna leave the organization? What are you gonna leave behind? Your test charters, where they will try to figure out what was done, what was the objectives, or it's better to have a detail level test cases with the steps that everybody can follow through this. Don't get me wrong. I like exploratory testing. It's a great strategy and techniques, but guess what? This is part of testing. It's already there by default. It's not something different, or this is not something which you're going to do it later or before or after. This is what we do every day. This is part of the game. This is part of our mindset, a tester's mindset, tester's mentality. This is what it is, in my opinion. Some of you might think, well, that's a whole discipline, or, this is a different activity. You need to get training for it. This is part of QA professional arsenal. It's got to be part of the ammunition. You cannot go to war without this ammunition. Absolutely not. You're going to lose. Okay. So let's continue. So exploratory testing in simple terms, right? The testing is creative testing without predefined test cases based on knowledge and skills of the tester. Tests are not defined in advance, right? This is what the major difference between the scripted testing and exploratory testing, by the way. Tests are not defined in advance. Well, how are you going to define tests, right? How are you going to define? Again, you cannot randomly start testing different things, right? At some point of time, you have to have a definition of the test plan, of the test cases, of the test coverage. You have to know what you're covering. How are you going to cover through the test charters only? And how will you know 100% that you're covering all angles of that particular functionality when you have no traceability whatsoever? How do you know you're covering everything? So please don't tell us that you don't need test cases to deliver quality products. You absolutely need test cases to deliver quality product. And I'll tell you the reasons why. The number one reason is you need to make sure that your user story or functionality not only tested properly from all the angles and all the perspectives, but is implemented properly, right? You might have 0 defects on a new release or a new sprint, but in production, the customers will not be happy with that sprint or with that particular functionality because it was not designed based on what they requested. It could be defect-free, but it's not designed according to their expectations. And that's where the problem is as well, right? So the test cases are absolutely important because, number one, you'll have a clear understanding on the coverage of a specific feature, functionality, enhancements. Number two, you'll have an idea on how long you need to set time for these types of verification and validation. How do you know that? Well, based on the number of test cases. How do you know that? Well, based on your productivity measures, right? If I'm going to do exploratory testing, I'm going to do a 2 hours exploratory testing session. Okay, great. But after that 2 hours, once again, looking at your test charter, observations and results, how anybody will understand and will know and will have a confidence to state that you covering everything in all the angles through your exploratory testing. How will you know that? Well, in our case, you'll see the test cases, you see steps, you see checkpoints, you see validations, you see acceptance criteria. Plus, for every step, you will have expected results and actual results. So everything is documented there and traceable back to each of the user story. And that's how you'll have a little bit better, I would say, confidence level that you have that sufficient coverage. Okay. So stating that you don't need test cases is for lazy testers, and lazy testers likes that. They pick this up and they said, well, you know, famous people stating that you don't need to explore, you don't need to build test cases because you can do testing without the test cases. Imagine what happens when the junior testers comes and asking me a question. Ruslan, do you know why some people telling that we don't need to create test cases, that building test cases is not a really good thing? It's a wrong thing to do. I'm hearing this very, very often because LinkedIn, social media, getting poisoned with some statements from some of you guys out there who truly not understanding the big problem which you are creating by simply stating that you don't need test cases. You don't need test cases. You don't need navigation, right? It's like, just think of it. You using navigation system. Navigation system takes you from point A to point B. Let's say you are in completely different country, right? And you need to reach that destination. How are you going to do it? Well, you can ask direction somebody and write it down, or you can use the navigation, right? Navigation takes you step by step. Or you're going to follow the exploratory testing and you're going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to find out. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go another way. I get lost. Then I turn here. I turn there. Well, isn't it better if you would have a directions, if you have instructions, if you know where to turn, where to go, left, right, how long it's going to take, you will know. Isn't it better? Absolutely. Testing is guided by the results of previously performed tests and the gain knowledge from them. Testers can apply deductive reasoning to the test outcomes. Absolutely. The focus is on finding defects by exploration instead of demonstrating systematic coverage. Parallel learning of the system under test design, and test execution. Experience and skills of individual testers strongly affect effectiveness and results. So let's talk about experienced tester. So what do you guys think about non-experienced tester? Can non-experienced tester be able to achieve a good results by doing the exploratory testing only and be effective? Absolutely not. We did this experiments many times. It's not working. Not working because junior testers, new testers, you know, hitting this field, entering this field, if they're gonna do this exploratory random testing, right, they're not gonna go far with this methodology. Okay, they're not gonna go far with this methodology because they simply will ignore building the test cases, stating that there is no point of building test cases. We're gonna do this and pick up all the defects through exploratory testing. Yeah, guys, no, don't go there. Exploratory testing is part of testing. Exploratory testing helps you, yes, to learn the application better, to think creatively and think outside of the box. it helps you to come up with additional scenarios, which, by the way, absolutely must be documented. If you come up with some scenarios by exploration today, you will forget this scenario later on. And that's an important scenario which might lead to some issues and problems down the road. Just think of it. You're not testing application just once in your lifetime and that's it. This application will be tested multiple times. You will have multiple releases. What are you going to leave behind you after? You're going to leave that organization. What are the artifacts you're going to leave behind yourself, right? What about automation testing, guys? What are you going to automate if you don't create definition of the flows, if you don't create test steps and test instructions and expected results? Do you want automation engineers to build this themselves and waste time when the test cases can be documented to begin with? When the user story is getting defined at that point of time, isn't it better to start building the test cases at that time and thinking about the application, thinking about the new functionality, thinking about different angles and perspectives on how you're going to test? Don't you think so? So, benefits of exploratory testing. Of course, exploratory testing have a lot of benefits. Creates engagement by enabling testers to use their minds, facilitates experimentation, discovery, and learning. Less test preparation. Yes, less test preparation, but is it really a benefit? In my opinion, it's not a benefit. Well, it might be a benefit when you're not ready. You have one day to test the whole application, but if that's the case, you're in trouble because you're not planning, you're not organizing, you're not doing a good project management. You should never be in the situation where you have one day to test the application or test the release. That's a disaster. Yeah, of course, you will not have time to build the test cases, but you should build time to build test cases. Same as goes for the developers. Developers should build time to do the proper unit testing, code review, static code analysis. All of this is important activities. You don't have time for it? Well, the code will suffer. And guess what? Yeah, testers will find defects, a lot of defects during the testing, closer to production, and you have to fix and address, and potentially release will not gonna hit the delivery date because there will be a lot of issues, a lot of problems. But if you plan everything the proper way, if you build enough time for those activities to do it right, you don't need to cover your undisciplined process with agile, buzzwords. You don't need to cover your absentees of test cases with exploratory testing stating you don't need test cases. We're going to do exploratory testing. Test charter is just good enough to use instead of the test plan or test cases. No. So let's continue. So exploratory testing helps to add more test cases and increase the coverage of the tests. That some people think that's correct. I personally believe this is adding value add. Many times, I personally, did exploratory testing and I came up with additional test cases, which I didn't think initially to begin with when I reviewed the requirements. Okay. So, but the thing is, I defined the test cases when the feature was not built yet. When I look at the feature, which is already deployed to QA environment, test environment, I start touching it, I start feeling it, I start looking at it, I start thinking differently because I see it now, as opposed to I didn't see it before. I saw it through the description or mock-up or prototype, limited prototype or wireframes. And I saw many scenarios which could be added, but I went back and I added those test cases to improve the test coverage for that particular module, for that particular feature, for that particular functionality or enhancements. I didn't ignore it and say, well, I just did it, exploratory testing, I already touched this feature. Well, I touched, but tomorrow I'm not going to test this application. I'm going to go to some other applications. Somebody else will be, instead of me, involved in the next release or next sprint. What are they going to do as part of regression testing when I just found 5-6 scenarios which I didn't document before, and now do you want me to ignore them and not document them? No, this is not the right approach, guys. This is not the right thing to do. Absolutely not. So, do you think exploratory testing has challenges and limitations? Absolutely. Everything in our world, in our lives, have limitations and challenges, right? There's nothing is perfect in this world, as you all know. So what are the challenges? Inexperienced testers would not be effective. That's what I said before. Really, just it's not easy for inexperienced tester, even if we train them and teach them how to do exploratory testing the proper way, and there's a lot of courses and trainings there, still, it's not going to be as effective as a tester would follow the test cases first, follow this through, build understanding, understand the acceptance criteria, understand the expected results, see the application in action, and then start thinking from a different perspective, different angles by applying exploratory testing, but not just jump in and say, okay, you got to verify this, but how to verify this, right? They need more directions. They need more instructions. Documentation of all events during execution is difficult to record if you do not have tools. So, I mean, there are a number of tools which helps you to capture information through the exploratory testing. But once again, you're capturing the information, it's recorded, right? Or it's basically, there's tools where you're following through and it captures the expected actual results as well, right? So there's a lot of interesting things out there. But once again, you have to have specific validations, checkpoints, and the expected results through the acceptance criteria in order to prove that application is working as expected, it's working as designed, it is working as requested by users, right? Don't know when to stop testing, right? Well, this is true. You really don't know. You think you know, but once again, remember my point. How do you know that you're covering all the angles here when you don't have traceability to the test cases? How do you know you're covering all the angles? Where are the metrics? Can you tell us the metrics? No, I never heard when I ask specific questions. James Beck, can you tell me the metrics which you're utilizing and leveraging? Michael Bolton, can you tell me the metrics? No metrics. Maybe that's the reason why those guys don't like metrics. You know, I'm a big fan of metrics. We make decisions based on metrics. Metrics never lie if you do them and collect them the proper way. Obviously, you can make up numbers, they will lie, but if you do it the right way, how it's supposed to, they will never lie. It's like you look yourself in the mirror. That's the metrics, okay? That's how it's supposed to be. So that's why, guys, you know, metrics through exploratory testing, how much time you spend? Yes, you're going to gather and you said, oh, I run 6 sessions, exploratory testing sessions, and roughly I spend 12 hours on them, 2 hours each, for example. Well, does it tell you much? Later on, in the future, we're going to run regression testing cycle. How are you going to do that, first of all? What is the scope? How are you going to select what needs to be verified and validated? Again, it will be right here, not documented anywhere. It will be in your head. I'm sorry. Not a good strategy, guys. Not a good strategy. No visibility on execution progress. Yes, there is really no visibility on the execution progress, because you might say, yes, my exploratory session completed. In that session, I was trying to verify registration module. Okay, that's understandable, not a problem. But once again, what did you cover there? Did you cover all the scenarios? Did you cover all the field validation rules, exception, special characters, error messages? How do I know you covering all of this? You're not going to define all of this in the test chapter. You're not going to define all of this because you just said you're not a big fan of the test cases. You should not build the test cases. So how will anybody know that you're covering all of the angles in there? How do we know that you cover every single error message? How do you know even what that error message supposed to be displayed as the error message? Where you're going to document that if you're not building the test cases? Where's your acceptance criteria and expected results? You're going to say in the test charter? I looked at the test charters. You don't find them there, guys. You don't find them there. So just a very quick point I want to make, because many people confuse exploratory testing with the ad hoc testing. It's not the same thing. Okay, ad hoc testing, that's what I call really truly random freestyle testing. No process, no methodology. You playing, you touching the system, you know. It's a little different than exploratory testing. So let's discuss about scripted testing, right? And why Sam Kanner, James Beck, and Michael Bolton are not big fans of it. So let's take a look at limitations of scripted testing based on Sam Kanner's view. Specifying the full set of tests at the start of the project is an invitation to failure. Well, I completely disagree with this statement. I repeating multiple times that building the test cases at the point where you're defining your requirements, when you're defining your user stories, this is the best time, because that stipulates you to think about the test design, about various of different scenarios, different types of validations which needs to be built. So how would one can say that specifying the full set of tests at the start of the project is an invitation to failure? What kind of failure? Are you referring, Mr. Sam Kanner, that you might change the test cases later on? Yes, that's okay. You can change them. You will change them, as a matter of fact. But what do you think? It's better not to create test cases at all and rely on exploratory testing only, or have it take a step at building the test cases first initially, and then improving them and going through the iterations until you sort of finalizing them. And test cases you can modify and update, you know, during the testing, at the end of the testing, after the testing, in the future releases. It doesn't matter. But I cannot agree with this. The requirement specifications are almost certain to change as the program evolves, so your test cases need to be reworked. Absolutely. We're in agile. Things are changing. Requirements are changing. User stories are changing. But it does not stopping you or preventing you from building the test cases. Do you really want to wait till requirements or user story be finalized on the last day of the sprint and then start building the test cases? Don't you think it's too late in the game to start building test cases at such a late stage? No, you have to jump in and build test cases. Absolutely. You don't need a single line of code to be created. All you need is requirements definition. You don't even need the requirements. You can have a brainstorming session discussing about the potential user story or functionality, and then start planning and building and drafting scenarios. So requirement specifications are always certain to change as the program evolves, so your test cases needs to be reworked. Your test cases will be reworked. Yes, I agree with that, but that's okay. Does it mean we should not start test design until functionality is built and ready for testing? I don't understand this. The earlier you design the test, the less you understand the program and its risk profile. I cannot agree with this. Absolutely not. The earlier you design the tests, the better and more comprehensive they will be, and the more it will trigger you to think about the functionalities and the proper validation and verification. Why wait till you start exploratory testing without documenting anything and then start documenting things? Will you have time? When? You will not have time to do that. You have to build and start drafting your test strategy, your test plan, your test scenarios, your test cases at the point you receive requirements, or at the point you start discussing about the new features, new functionalities, and brainstorming that. That's the right time to do it. The scripted approach means the test stays the same even though the risk profile changes. The tests stays the same, and sometimes they don't stay the same. They're changing, they're evolving. As I said, it's a living document. The test cases are living documents. You're modifying them. Every time you have a new release, certain things get changed, added, you're modifying your test cases, right? They never stay the same. They might stay the same if there is no changes, or you got everything perfect from the first time, which not always the case, but they're changing. A suite of regression tests becomes a pool of tests that have one thing in common. The program has passed all of them. That's okay for manufacturing, quality control, but for software? What do you mean have passed all of them? The program have passed all of them. Yes, regression testing and the test cases, which are documenting existing functionalities, must have. If everything works, yes, you will pass all of them, but they always requires in the future some modifications, right? Because some functionalities are getting changed. New fields are getting added to the form, so you're adding and modifying certain things. Certain things you reposition. Certain flows are changing, right? So your regression test cases will change as well. So a suite of regression tests becomes a pool of tests that have one thing in common. The program has passed all of them. What do you mean program passed all of them again? You're not passing all of them. They might fail in case there is a problems, right? Unless you are the outsourced service provider, scripting is probably an industry work practice for design. Yes, I am a testing services provider. But even if I was not, back in the days, the test cases were essential for success and quality of any deliverables, which my team, me personally, were releasing. Back in the days, I run testing, system integration testing and system testing for one of the big internet banking application, global internet banking application, with 150 testers worldwide, with 120 applications as part of the global internet banking application. Just think of it. Imagine if I will tell senior management or anybody out there, guys, 120 applications. Forget about manual test cases. Forget about test cases at all. Forget about regression test cases. Don't document this. We're going to just do exploratory testing. We're going to do testing without scripted test cases. Whoa. What kind of mess we would have? What kind of disaster we would have at that point of time? We have tens of thousands of test cases there. representing various of different applications. I mean, 120 plus applications as part of the global internet banking platform. Some of us didn't even remember the names of all of these applications. Imagine, and you stating you don't need scripted test cases. How are you going to run the business? How are you going to run the testing? How are you going to achieve anything without this? So I absolutely disagree with this. All of this, I copy and paste those statements from Sam Carner's white papers and research papers, and some others. James Back and Michael Bolton supported some of those statements as well, which, I just don't get it. I don't understand. Maybe some of you understand this better, but from my perspective, that's not possible, guys. It's not possible. You might say, well, that's the old-fashioned way. It is old-fashioned way, but that's a proven way. And there is a proven success with this approach. Okay? Don't allow you to become lazy testers. Don't allow yourself stop building test cases and rely just purely on exploratory testing and the charter, test charter creation. You're not going to go far with this, guys. Mark my words. Okay? So let's make a final closing statements here. Exploratory testing is interpreted in many ways and taught in many ways. If you are a tester, you're already conducting exploratory testing by default. You guys are doing it, okay? Don't think or don't treat this as a separate discipline which you have to apply at some point within the testing cycle. And, you're doing this from day one. You become a QA tester, you have this mindset. You got to build that mindset of exploring the application, investigating the application, studying and learning the application. This is part of the testing game, guys. So again, another definition, exploratory testing, or I seeing some of the titles, exploratory tester. I'm exploratory tester. Guys, are you kidding me? What do you mean exploratory tester? There is a designation. Shouldn't be any designation. You are a tester. You are a QA professional. You're doing this as part of your day-to-day responsibilities. This is your duty to do this and apply this. Okay? Whether you call it exploratory testing or God knows at different terms for exploration, it means absolutely nothing. This is part of our tester's job. This is part of our day-to-day activities. This is part of our mindset. Exploratory testing is not a separate discipline, guys, or phase or activities. It's part of testing. It's part of the tester mindset. Remember this, guys. Don't get confused. Don't let anybody confuse you. Do not allow exploratory testing to convert you to a lazy or undisciplined tester. You should use structured approach to testing, which includes exploratory testing techniques. Guys, I know sometimes building test cases is boring. You don't have time. Sometimes it's not an exciting job. Of course, you would say, well, let's do exploratory testing. Let's forget about this boring test design. When you start this, you start degrading. As a QA professional, you start degrading. Why? Because there is no more discipline for you. There is no structure. There is no discipline. There will be issues. There will be problems. So don't let this happen, guys. Don't let this happen. Treat exploratory testing as must-have part of your testing phase approach, strategy, and methodology. If you're going to do that, you will be successful. You will be disciplined. And many people will say thank you to you because you're going to do it the proper way. Okay. So please don't get confused or don't take this for granted when somebody will say exploratory testing, you don't need to build test cases for it. Okay. Forget about this. You have to go back You identify certain things, certain scenarios, certain paths which you didn't think about before. Please do yourself a favor, document this. It's extremely, extremely important for you and for the other people within the organization, within your testing team, within your agile team, because that will serve the purpose for the future. It will help automation engineers to take that flow and automate. It will help regression testing in the future to select during the focused regression testing just those specific scenarios, because there might be some impact analysis done that you have to verify that specific area. Do yourself a favor. Don't be fooled. Don't be confused with the statements such as no manual test cases created. It's a good thing. Forget about it. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. It's useless activity. Guys, don't be fooled. Thank you very much. All the best, and I hope you learned something today. Stay healthy and take care. We'll see you next time.